11 days before Elena Moore was found dead beneath a bridge, she told her closest friend she was scared for her life. Not nervous, not anxious about something small, scared for her life. She said it quietly, at a brunch table, surrounded by people she trusted, in a voice meant for only one person to hear. And then she said she couldn't explain why. Not there, not in front of everyone. 11 days later, a search team found her body under a bridge on Old Cherokee Road. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division took over the investigation. That last detail matters. Law enforcement agencies don't call in the state's Major Crimes Division for an accident. Before investigators found Elena Moore, they found a warning. The question this case has never answered: what did she already know? Elena Catherine Moore was 39 years old, adopted from Russia as a child, raised in South Carolina, a personal trainer in Lexington, the kind of person half the town seemed to know because she'd poured their drinks bartending, filled their prescriptions at CVS, or pushed them through a workout when they wanted to quit. Friends describe her the same way, almost word for word: positive, uplifting, someone who built a life out of very little and made it look easy. Which is exactly why what friends started noticing in the weeks before she disappeared stood out so sharply. Elena had always documented her life online: fitness, clients, community, visible, constant. Then, roughly a month before she vanished, she went quiet. Her friend Lauren Beasley said it was completely out of character. The silence wasn't evidence of anything on its own, but silence from someone who had never been silent before is not the same as ordinary quiet. Something had changed. The people closest to her felt it before they could explain it. The question is whether what changed came from inside Elena's life or from outside it. The 31st of May. A restaurant in Lexington. A group of women at a table. Elena's clients, longtime friends. Elena arrived and immediately seemed off. Not erratic, just watching. She got up once, walked to the door, looked outside, came back. Friend Sandra Campbell was there. She has video from that afternoon. Elena laughed through the meal. Stayed present, seemed, in Sandra's words, in her right mind. Then it ended. Sandra had to leave to pick up her son. She hugged Elena goodbye. Elena held on, longer than a normal goodbye, long enough that Sandra noticed, and she said it quietly so the rest of the table wouldn't hear. "We've got to catch up, one-on-one." Sandra asked what she meant. "I'm scared for my life. It's crazy right now." "What are you talking about? You don't even know." That was as far as it went. Too many people at the table. She said they'd talk soon. Sandra left the brunch. She figured there would be time. On the 4th of June, she missed a call from Elena. Didn't think much of it. They never spoke again. That was the 31st of May, 11 days before Elena's body was found. Friends remembered the warning long before investigators knew it existed. The question is what Elena already knew, and whether she knew enough to name it. If you want documentation-first coverage, primary sources, not speculation, subscribe to Crime Deepcut. When this case develops, we'll be here. 1 week before Elena disappeared, something happened that changed the nature of the warning. The 4th of June, the same day Elena tried to call Sandra. A DoorDash driver delivered an order to an apartment complex half a mile from the gym where Elena would later be last seen. Before the resident could collect it, Elena walked up and took the bag, as if it were hers. The resident, John Moore, took it back, turned to go inside, and according to his account, Elena started to follow him in. She seemed really confused, he said, disoriented about where she was. An hour later, same complex. Elena was going through packages outside a neighbor's door. "Do you know my neighbor?" "No." "Then what are you doing?" "Honestly," Elena said, "I don't know." Here is what those two incidents mean when you put them beside each other. The 31st of May, Elena knew exactly what she was afraid of. She couldn't say it in public, but she knew. You don't even know. The 4th of June, she didn't know where she was. Those are not the same person. Something happened between the 31st of May and the 4th of June that changed Elena Moore from someone who knew she was scared to someone who didn't know what she was doing. According to friends, repeated consistently across multiple accounts. She was taken to a hospital that same day, and from there to Three Rivers, a mental health facility. She left on her own. They couldn't hold her. This is not officially confirmed by police. The 31st of May, scared for her life. The 4th of June, disoriented, reportedly hospitalized. Something closed that gap. The investigation hasn't explained what. The 11th of June, 6:40 in the evening, Elena signed into a Planet Fitness on Whitford Way, not her usual gym. She worked out for over 2 hours. At approximately 9 p.m., she walked out. No car, no one picked her up. She walked, not toward the parking lot, not toward anything familiar, toward the wooded area behind a nearby Lowe's. At 9:17 p.m., a Publix parking lot camera on Old Cherokee Road caught her again. Same hoodie, still walking. More than a mile from the gym by now. Alone, in the dark. Then she kept going. Down Old Cherokee Road toward a stretch with a middle school, a creek, dense trees. Her phone stopped transmitting location data by the following Monday. The next morning, not that night, the next morning, her husband, Brandon SLED, reported her missing. A woman who, 1 week earlier, didn't know why she was standing at a stranger's door, walked alone into the woods at night. She knew 2 things 11 days earlier, that she was scared, and that she couldn't say why out loud. Neither of those things explains why she was alone in the dark on Old Cherokee Road. Something put her on that road. The investigation hasn't said what. Lexington PD deployed drones almost immediately over the wooded corridor behind the gym. Nothing. By the 15th of June, a multi-agency operation was underway. County Sheriff's deputies, SLED, the Department of Natural Resources, State Highway Patrol, Fire, and EMS. They moved tree by tree along Common Farm Lane. Still nothing. A post went up on social media claiming Elena had been found. The community exhaled. Police retracted it. False lead. Then, on the 16th of June, a single witness tip changed the entire search. Someone reported seeing a woman matching Elena's description entering the woods near Lakeside Middle School, the intersection of North Lake Drive and Old Cherokee Road, on the night she vanished. That location is less than a mile from where she was last captured on camera. The search moved. The next day, she was found. 6 days. Multiple agencies, drones, personnel moving tree by tree, and the case broke on a single witness. Searches don't move like that without a reason. The question is what that witness saw, and whether they saw it 6 days earlier and said nothing, because if Elena Moore was beneath that bridge from the night she walked away, in an area within walking distance of the last camera that caught her, the question isn't only why no one found her. It's why it took 6 days for anyone to say where to look. This is where the case stops being one story and becomes two. Brandon SLED spent 14 years with the Lexington County Sheriff's Department before becoming a private investigator. He and Elena had been together more than 13 years, married since 2024. He knows how missing persons cases work. He knows what detectives look for, what questions they ask, what behavior they watch for in the people closest to a victim. He spent 14 years on that side of the table. Sandra Campbell says the marriage was failing. She says Brandon's calls to Elena had a tone she didn't like. She says Elena skipped an expensive concert rather than be around him that night. She says they were actively discussing separation. There has been issues. They were trying to separate. This is red flags to me. Henry Dukes, a private investigator hired by Brandon's family and a former colleague of Brandon's in law enforcement, describes a different marriage entirely. 2 outstanding, nice people building their life together. Brandon, in his words, planned on spending the rest of his life with this woman. When asked directly whether there had been trouble in the marriage, Dukes didn't deny it. I'm not saying there might not have been something going on, but I think that's private. That is not a denial. After Elena went missing, Brandon posted to Facebook, not an appeal for help finding his wife, a reference to an old photo. When people demanded answers, he said only that the photo had been taken weeks earlier. He has said publicly that police advised him not to speak to media. A retired sergeant from a neighboring county, asked about that, said it isn't typical. Usually police want the spouse visible. asking the public for help. Brandon SLED knows that. He spent 14 years in law enforcement. He knows that when a spouse goes quiet, it draws attention. He knows that when a spouse doesn't appeal for help publicly, investigators notice. He was trained to notice it himself. Brandon SLED has not been named a suspect. Police have said so directly, more than once. But a man who spent 14 years investigating cases knows something else. Not being named a suspect today is not the same as being cleared. Two accounts of this marriage exist. Both cannot be fully true. And only one of them ends with Elena's body found beneath a bridge. The autopsy results have not been released. When they are, this is where you'll find what they mean, not just what they say. Subscribe so you're here when that happens. For 6 days, the question in Lexington was, where is Elena? On the 17th of June, that question changed. At 2:48 p.m., officers found her beneath the bridge near Berkshire Drive. Olive green hoodie, black athletic pants. The body answered where she was. It didn't answer why she was there. Witnesses say SLED agents went door to door that same afternoon, showing badges, asking neighbors if they recognized a photograph. A neighbor, Joe Townsend, remembers the sirens, the helicopters, and a question that still doesn't sit right with him: had she been there the whole time? The site is not remote. 10 to 15 minutes on foot from the Publix where she was last caught on camera. A bridge, a creek, dense trees, but not deep woods, not far. Coroner Margaret Fisher said nothing was obviously wrong on initial examination, that the determination of foul play would ultimately fall to law enforcement, not her office. She was careful with her words, careful in a way that suggested she understood the weight of them. 6 days of South Carolina heat complicates everything a coroner can determine by sight. Toxicology, which can take weeks, would be the real answer. What is documented is this: Lexington police did not close this as a routine recovery. They requested SLED, the state's major crimes division, take over the death investigation. Departments do not call in the state's most serious investigators for an accident. The bridge answered one question and created 5 more. Here is the confirmed record as it stands. Elena Catherine Moore, 39, walked out of a Planet Fitness on the 11th of June and was never seen alive again. Her body was recovered 6 days later beneath a bridge on Old Cherokee Road. No cause of death has been released. SLED is investigating. Everything else is documented. Nothing else is resolved. 2 people who knew her best described 2 different marriages. The search shifted after 6 days because a single witness came forward, and investigators have not explained why that witness waited. SLED, not local police, is running the death investigation, and the coroner was careful with her words. The autopsy may explain how Elena Moore died. Toxicology may explain what was in her system that night. Investigators may eventually explain exactly what happened between the gym and the bridge, but none of those answers will automatically explain why, 11 days before her body was found, she looked at the person she trusted most and said she was scared for her life. That question existed before the search began, before the body was found, before SLED was called. She knew something was wrong. The only question this case has never answered, the one that opened it and still hasn't closed it, is whether she knew who. 11 days separated the warning from the discovery. Until investigators close that gap, it remains exactly where it started, the center of the case.